Welcome to the Talent Development Hot Seat. I'm your host, Andy Storch, and I'm excited that you're joining me today for another great episode and conversation to help you up your game and improve your capabilities in the world of talent development. And today we're talking about talent development as well as broadly more HR and how we in HR and talent development can better use data analytics and really think about evidence-based HR. My guest today is Jig Ramji, who is a former chief people officer and talent officer for a number of organizations, including Bloomberg, LSEG, and Aviva, to name a few. Jig, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you for having me here. Really excited to be having this conversation with you.
I'm excited to have you on as well. As I said to you before we started recording, I think that this topic of leveraging data in talent and HR and using evidence-based practices to really connect to the business and make better decisions in HR and talent is something that's really important that a lot of people are trying to figure out, and we haven't really covered that much on this show. So I'm eager to dig into that. But before we do, I'd love to start with a little bit of your background. I know you've worked for a number of different organizations in multiple countries and continents, which is really interesting to me. So tell me, how did you get into this talent development space to begin with?
Really interesting, actually. So, I mean, I guess from an academic perspective, it all makes a lot of sense. I, did a undergraduate degree in psychology and then a postgraduate degree in occupational psychology. So, the foundations were there to think about talent and people and performance and of course data. Because in my degree, I spent probably more time in a stats lecture than I did in a psychology lecture. Certainly in the formative part of my degree. So that's where I guess all began, and then I did the classic route into the people function. Did recruitment, did generalist HR roles, did HR business partner roles, and then I decided to go into consultancy for a while. Worked for Deloitte for many years in human capital, and so I've got both of the pathways, consulting and in-house HR. And then it was actually after a number of senior roles at Bloomberg, more so in the regional head of HR and then the chief people officer type role for one of our businesses, that I was offered the opportunity to head up the talent team. And that's when the talent journey began.
Okay, so you were in consulting, human capital, more general HR roles before moving into specifically focusing on talent and getting into a chief talent role.
Yeah, I almost kind of did the classic start more generalist, then consultancy, then go back into generalist, get a lot of experience, a lot of different countries, lots of different regions,
Hmm.
and then head up talent. Yeah, it
Yeah.
was a slightly unusual way, but kind of makes sense if you think about my career and my academic background too.
And for those listening that may be considering different pathways, what would you say have been some of the maybe the pros and cons of being on the consulting side versus being in-house, since you spend extensive time doing both?
Yeah, I think no doubt about it. By the time I got into consulting, I was already an experienced hire.
Hmm.
And that's always challenging to transition from a very certain type of role and organization to something quite different. So the tricky part is obviously doing the transitions between two different worlds. The positive aspect, and of course, answering your question, is it gives you such a range of experience and such a range of diverse experience. Perhaps is probably the better way to describe it. And that just adds to your capability, the breadth and depth of your skill set to be just a stronger leader within whatever area that you are, but just a stronger leader myself in the people space or the HR space. So that's what it's really given me. I think I often say sometimes if you do 3 years in consultancy, it can give you almost 6 years worth of corporate experience. So I just feel very privileged and fortunate to have done both.
Yeah. And then comparing, because I know on the consulting side, you get to experience a lot of different projects, companies, people. And if you like variety, like I do as well, that can be a big pro. But I know there's also some great benefits to being in-house and really seeing things through. What would you say have been the big
Yeah, I
pros
mean,
and
I think you've spoken about it in exactly how I describe it. I mean, I loved going into consultancy initially and having such different sector and actually geographic experiences as well. And again, feel very lucky to have had those opportunities. But then, after a period of time, you do sometimes feel it would be great to see something through in terms of even a longer period of time, or almost multiple year time. And I think going back into in-house HR roles gave me that opportunity to again see something through and really see the outcome and the end results of your work as well. So look, to be honest, both give you great job satisfaction. But I guess that's one aspect. When you're in an in-house role, you really do get to see the fruits of your labor over the long term, and sometimes the outcome that originally led you to do the work in the first place.
Yeah. Another thing I wanted to ask you about, I know I believe, if I remember right, you're from Manchester in the UK, but you've also lived in the Netherlands, in Australia, in Singapore, and Hong Kong before moving back to the UK. What are some important things you've learned from living and working in multiple countries around the world?
I think, honestly, I think before I'd actually lived anywhere else apart from the UK, I think you just have a natural assumption that the world of work works in a certain way, organizations work in a certain way. And I think the opportunity to experience a slightly different culture, sometimes even a culture whereby the language is the same, I think your mindset often is very, oh well, everybody will be the same, my leadership style needs to be the same, and I'll be successful. The approach that I've taken in the past is going to be successful. And I think just experiencing such different worlds and different cultures really helped me to understand that there is no such thing as one size fits all. And what makes us unique as individuals is almost exacerbated when you go and work in an environment that's quite different from your home environment. And so for me personally, from a personal perspective, fabulous to go and live and experience life in many different countries and travel the world is something I personally really revere. But for me as a leader, it taught me how to be a global leader. It taught me how to be a leader who understands and is curious rather than assumes and operates with one style.
Yeah, it completely makes sense. And I've had the benefit of working with people in lots of different countries around the world. And it's always so eye-opening to learn about different cultures and how people operate. And at the core, a lot of people are the same and like human needs, what people want, growth and security and things like that. But the way people interact with their boss, with their team can be quite different across different cultures.
Communication style, preference of learning, the way people want information, it's so different. And so it's often some of the basic things that you learn or pick up after living in a place for a period of time that will stand with you for the test of time. So anyone who hasn't done it, I highly recommend going outside of your comfort zone and experiencing life in another place.
Oh, well, I'm doing that now, although I'm spending a lot of my time on Zoom still talking to people from
well, there is an
from lots
inevitability of the world.
Right, exactly. Well, there's benefits to doing it today. I want to get into our topic for today, which is evidence-based HR and using data. How did you get into this? And I would love for you to talk about some of the things you've learned and the benefits, like why people should be considering this approach.
I think, going back, and I touched on it earlier, a lot of what science is about is around obviously falsifying hypotheses with a data-driven approach where possible. Large part of my degree was around statistical significance, and I love that. I love being able to demonstrate that hypotheses can be tested in a robust way, and every organization uses metrics and data points to articulate business success or business failure or business growth. Now, often that is financial data or other critical data points. I've always had a very strong perspective that in the same way that finance use critical data points, there is a huge opportunity for us as people practitioners to also use data points and evidence in the same way that other business divisions and functions use it, so that we can sit at the table and use our data to also predict the future and also predict success for the organization. So that's kind of where it comes from. And it's been a bit of an obsession, perhaps that's a strong word, that we as a function, not me within my organization, but us as people practitioners, really try and get on the bandwagon around evidence-based HR.
And why do you think this, I know you got into it earlier on, and I'd love to hear some of the benefits, what you accomplished with it, but why do you think it's so important for people to pay attention and think about adopting this method today?
I think early on in my career, and I think we're better as the world of work is much better now. But HR often felt like the function that was regarded in this way as soft or fluffy, or it's nice to have. And I've always resented that type of description. I've always wanted us to be seen as critical, because I truly believe that we are critical for an organization's success. And so for me, if we can use data to validate and evidence the impact that we have for business success, that is a way that we communicate not only with people within our own kind of sphere of influence, but across the corporate world, externally, shareholders, etc., that the work that we do is strongly evidenced by data and is strongly evidenced by business success utilizing data.
So a lot of this is about being more strategic and really connecting with business needs, and showing that, it's not just proving that HR is an important part of the business, but actually contributing in a meaningful way so that HR continues to be, and talent continues to be, a really valuable part of the business.
Contributing in perhaps the best way to describe it, as a critical way. Maybe that's the way I look at it. And I think, excuse me, one of the things that I do feel, we use data all the time in every aspect of the way we live our lives, right? Data predicts whether you're going to like certain types of music. Data predicts what show you should watch on Netflix next. Data probably predicts purchases that you may want to make on Amazon Prime. In the same way, people data can demonstrate and potentially predict what are the clear markers for success for an organization, and what are the critical risk points. People sometimes don't want to use the word risk when it comes to people data, but actually some of the greatest success that people functions have is the management of risk. So if we can kind of use people data in a way to manage risk, to predict future success, to predict critical success factors for an organization, I think that is an opportunity that every people practitioner gets very, very excited about, because it gives us a true seat at the table in a way that I think sometimes we've struggled in the past to get.
Yeah, no doubt. Let's share some examples. I'd love to hear some tangible examples of, like, how do you take this philosophy, this theory, and put it into action?
It was interesting. I think I was very lucky at the start of my role at Bloomberg when I first moved into the talent world. Had the opportunity to go and actually talk to some exemplar organizations about some of their talent practices. So I won't kind of list out who those were, because I think it then makes me susceptible to describing an organization as one of the best in the world, which I don't feel like is my job to do. But I did talk to quite a number of organizations about some of their best practices. And interestingly enough, I was talking to Microsoft actually, and they said, I'd be really interested to know what you've done, which you're particularly proud of. And I actually talked about this piece of work that we'd done, where we identified what were the most critical elements of success for a leader at Bloomberg. And we did a longitudinal piece of research. That wasn't me, that was somebody else who did that fantastic work. But we then clearly had data points to show that regardless of what level of leader you were, which part of the business you were in, these were the greatest predictors of leadership success. So moving into that role, I took that data and ensured that every aspect of our employee lifecycle measured those critical leadership data points. So, as an example, how we hire people into the organization, we use that data point. How we promoted people, we used that framework and then collected data from it. How we did leadership effectiveness around 180-degree feedback surveys, we used those data points. How we did performance, we used those data points. So within a very short space of time, we then had a data set linked to those leadership attributes across all of the moments that matter in an employee lifecycle journey. So all of a sudden, because we truly believe that these were the leadership attributes that matter, or characteristics or behaviors that matter, we then started to see where we had an abundance of that capability across different businesses, different countries, different geographies, different levels of leadership, and where we had gaps. And therefore, it allowed us to be much more strategic and thoughtful as to how we were going to plug those gaps. Were we going to hire more people with the gaps, or were we going to develop our leadership development strategy, or create a leadership development strategy based on those gaps? And before we knew it, we were creating evidence-based strategies across the talent function in a way that we'd never done before.
Yeah, I bet. That's really interesting. And I'm curious, where is that data coming from? And I'm sure every organization has a different level of data, different sources, right? But is all that data being reported by managers, or where's the data coming from?
It's a data analytics company, so they're very, very good at identifying all the sources of data, but then obviously then ensuring that that data exists in probably now a cloud data lake, and that every feed goes into that lake, so that then we have some fabulous people scientists who can then create analysis of what the world is like today within the context of Bloomberg, and actually what it's predicting for the future as well. So those data points were coming from multiple sources. We bespoked things like psychometric assessments as well, because we truly believed in our longitudinal study. And so, we created and bespoked every data point to ensure that we were collecting this type of data.
Do you think this is something that can only be done in large enterprise companies that have data scientists and things like this, or is it something that you feel like can still be done in, let's say, smaller organizations that don't have quite the same resources?
I think it can. I mean, look, we always have to operate with an element of pragmatism anyway. Yeah. I think the critical piece is consistency. So for me, what you can't do is then start to change things very, very quickly, because if you're suddenly collecting 5 data points and then decide, actually, I quite like this, I'm going to collect those data points, now I'm going to collect something different over there, then you lose consistency, then you lose reliability, then you lose validity. So more so than anything else, you can keep it fairly simple as long as there's consistency and data is stored in a central location for which you can then report. So for me, rather than it being about only large corporate organizations or large organizations can do it, I think it's more around discipline and HR functions collecting data in a consistent way so that you get data reliability and validity for the long term, not just for the short term.
Yeah. So how would you get started? How would you recommend people get started? If someone's listening thinking, okay, I work in talent development. We haven't really been leveraging data that much. We've kind of just rely on, managers reporting on performance reviews and just kind of collecting and making subjective decisions and things like that. How would you recommend getting going?
So I think every organization has a critical opportunity or a platform by which there might be a pain point for the organization. So I'll make something up. So you could argue that organization X has always struggled to hire in external talent, and for that external talent to achieve success within the organization. Quite a frequent hypothesis, of course. In that scenario, I would say, okay, well, let's have a look at the selection and assessment strategy that we're deploying to bring in external talent. And then let's start to have a much more data-driven approach to that, because we know it's a pain point for the organization. And if it's a pain point for the organization, then the likelihood is that you're going to get buy-in from the organization, senior leaders, CEOs, etc., to take a data-driven approach. And then use that as a pilot to say that if we were to take a data-driven approach across some of our biggest problems, we would be able to identify the source of the problem, identify what's working as a solution, what's not working, and then move in the right direction going forward. So I think where people haven't done it in the past, don't need to boil the ocean and do everything at once. really start to focus on critical business challenges or problems that the organization can get really behind and start to use data to try and predict whether the solutions that you're deploying are working, or in some cases not working, and then you can pivot and do something slightly different.
Right. Okay. What are some key ways that we can be using this form of evidence-based HR of data and using data in talent development? I know you talked a little bit about succession planning, promotions, things like that. But when we're thinking about putting leadership development programs together, other programs to help develop our talent, how do you see data really factoring into that? How can we leverage this in our talent development roles?
So, look, I think leadership's an interesting example because there is no doubt in my mind that whenever you talk about leadership to people, they're like critical, super critical, got to get the right level of leadership in the organization. It's a critical success point for us. If we don't get this right, we're not going to achieve business success. So one of the things that I would really advocate for is use data, whether that's leadership effectiveness data, individual data, to identify whether the solutions that you're putting forward in leadership development are making a difference in growing capability or enhancing capability or mitigating against risk. So I'll give you a working example. We did a great piece of work at the London Stock Exchange Group whereby there was a hypothesis that we did not have the right caliber of leadership at certain levels within the organization to grow our business in certain parts of Asia. So the hypothesis was tested using data. We identified that we were probably, I would say, 180 to 200 leaders short in 24 months in order to take bigger accountability and responsibility. And we created a leadership acceleration program in the region to mitigate against that and grow or accelerate that leadership capability so that we would have a better chance of filling those roles internally rather than going buying that capability from elsewhere.
Okay. So really using it to be thoughtful about what roles are we going to be looking for. And what I'm also thinking there is we hear so much now from people and organizations talking about we're becoming a skills-based organization. We want to identify the skills of the future. You would use this as well to think about what skills do you need today and what skills do we need long-term.
Definitely. And because it was such a critical piece of work, we had to report into it was like it's part of a very large project, with those funny project names, and the project name board would ask us or my team to report regularly on the progress of growing this leadership capability in that 18 to 24-month period. And we had to say, I think we're doing good. I think we've got 65 leaders ready to take roles. We've still got a gap of 25 or 30 or 40 or whatever it was. And having that governance structure behind it just meant that our data-driven approach reassured the project team and reassured the organization that what we were doing was getting us closer to where we needed to be in order for the region to grow in the long term.
And how do you bring AI into this? Like how does AI factor in now? What tools were you using that maybe you can share, or how can people think about leveraging AI? Because everyone's trying to figure that out anyway. And I know, leveraging data is a great way to bring AI into the work you're doing.
Well, I mean, I would say there were so many parallels around data. You asked about data and the discipline required to create data consistency so that you can have an evidence-based way of working, or an evidence-based HR strategy, or an evidence-based talent function. But I think AI is a really good example of, again, getting your data fundamentals right. And the reason I say that is, AI in essence takes existing data and uses that insight to fundamentally create either analysis or decisions on behalf of either a human, or in some cases on behalf of another piece of AI.
Right.
But your AI is only as good as the quality of data that it is evaluating fundamentally. So the way I kind of look at it is, it's a very different way of creating analysis and predictability for the future, but the fundamentals remain the same. The quality of your data, how reliable that data is, how valid that data is as sources of truth for AI going forward is going to be the critical success factor. And it was really interesting how I was talking to, or I was in a conversation where an entrepreneur was talking about that and said the power of AI is it allows you to be very, very iterative and constantly test whether what you have as a solution is going to work. It's reduced timelines by 3 to 5 years in favor of agile or trial-based iterative processes. But that is only possible if the quality of the data that it's evaluating is as strong as it needs to be. With everything, you can have the smartest or the most advanced technology or the most advanced brain when it comes to people science, but the source of where it is doing its analysis is the critical success factor, not the capability of AI, and certainly not the capability of people scientists when it comes to evidence-based data.
And are there any tools that you've used with regards to leveraging data that you recommend? I know there's probably lots out there. It may depend on the organization and partnerships and things like that, but I'm sure people would love any recommendations you have.
So look, my favorite is still ChatGPT, and maybe that's because I now totally understand how it works, and I'm getting quite addicted to deeper prompt engineering and almost asking it to test itself. And I think there's a real power in that. I think lots of people within organizations are excited about Copilot doing a lot of the simple tasks to support or augment their day-to-day work. But my hack is a little bit different. And my hack, I'm stealing from somebody else, and I won't say who, but I actually think it's a great, great hack. What I think everyone should do is ask their colleagues, ask their friends, ask their co-workers, and just say, what is a new AI tool that you've discovered in the last 5 to 10 days?
Right.
Because everything is so rapidly changing so quickly. I think there's some really nice coaching AI tools out there at the moment. I really, really like how some of them work. I think there's some fabulous assessment AI tools out there as well, and companies that are really focusing on how they enrich a recruitment team using AI and assessment teams. So I think that's going to be something that will continue to be very prevalent in our day-to-day roles as talent practitioners. And I think one of the things that if you think about some of the best leadership development experiences that you have around experiential simulations and things like that, I think the AI tools of the future are going to be able to even enhance that further. And then the other one, which I think is quite powerful, that I've seen quite recently, is language, like learning language AI tools. I think they're really good. So rather than the traditional way of gamification and learning words, you can kind of start to, in a safe way, have talk to an AI tool in a different language, and really practice your conversational skills in a safe way that is much more realistic in terms of learning a language rather than translation and learning words.
Yeah, I started to leverage that a little bit. I'm on a journey of learning Spanish right now, and I work with a live tutor a few times a week, but I also use Duolingo every day, and Duolingo has been using more and more AI. And now they have, one of their characters will call me, and I can have sort of a live conversation.
I think that's so cool, right?
Yeah, it's very interesting. It's still a little, I find theirs still to be a little bit clunky. We kind of make fun of it in my family, but it's, I know they're investing a lot. It's getting better all the time. You can use ChatGPT for that as well. I mean, I asked ChatGPT like, hey, can we practice Spanish? Can you throw some vocabulary words at me? Can you give me, some fill in the blank, like quiz me on this stuff, and it'll do whatever you need to do. And you can have a voice chat as well.
And I think that's the one thing that we still have to absolutely acknowledge as well. So much of this is advancing at such a rapid rate. It's not the finished article. So I do think one of the things that I would strongly advocate for is not to necessarily accept everything as perfect when it comes to things like ChatGPT or some of these language tools or these coaching techniques that are currently being deployed by AI bots. be a little bit patient, because I do think organizations are moving at the pace of light in many ways, and it can't be perfect first time round. And there is still that human judgment piece that is still the most valuable asset you can bring to any given situation.
Mm. One of my favorite topics in talent development that I'm most passionate about, as many people know, is career development and
Mm.
helping people take ownership of their careers, grow in their careers. Just curious if you have any examples or thoughts on how we can use this evidence-based approach, leverage data to help people leverage resources and grow in their careers. How have you used it in the career development realm?
Yeah, I think some of it was still in its infancy, around things like talent marketplaces. So
Hmm.
again, using a skills-based approach to identify roles that exist within organizations which have almost skills adjacencies and skills experiences that you have, which you may not necessarily have thought of in the past because you had quite a traditional people HR career. But AI within talent marketplaces should now be able to better understand skills adjacencies and predict where someone could be successful or somebody could move in terms of career, which is a little bit more left field than perhaps the past indicated. So I think that could be a really nice way for people to almost embrace very different roles that they ever expected to, using a data driven approach, which
Hmm.
would turn around and say, you've got skills A, B, C, D, E, F,
Right.
similar to skills A, B, C, D, E, F in role X, completely different professional community, completely different to what you've done before. But based on the data, we know that there's a strong predictability of you being successful with the following development needs in order
Right.
to move. So I think that could be really exciting, because sometimes, and I'm sure you've seen it too, where people are afraid to do something that's completely outside of their comfort zone.
Hmm.
But imagine the world. Imagine the world where it is outside your comfort zone, but you've got a data point or you've got an AI tool saying,
Right.
"Actually, Andy, because of what you've done and because of your experiences and because of your skills, there's pretty good evidence that you could easily do this with a bit, bit of development and a bit of support,
Mm.
and, and that might be the impetus, or that might be the thing that kind of allows you to take that risk that perhaps you wouldn't have in the world beforehand."
Yeah, absolutely. Is there anything else around this topic of leveraging data in HR, especially talent development, that we haven't covered, you think is important for people to know as they're getting
I
into
think
it?
there's a mindset thing. I think there's a
Yeah.
certain mindset piece. I think one of the things I've often talked to even members of my team, they really, really love the idea of leveraging data, and they really love the idea of being much more data driven, but they're a little bit afraid to put themselves out there and start talking in a slightly different way to what they've done in the past. And my kind of advice there is no doubt that some of this may be new and some of this may be a learning opportunity or a growth opportunity, but it puts you in great standing for the future if you can adopt an evidence-based way of thinking, because not only does it help you from a data perspective, but it probably does help you in that future HR tech AI piece as well, because the fundamentals and the parameters are pretty similar in terms of what we're trying to do.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, Jig, this has been really great. This is a topic that I don't have a lot of experience with. I know many of our listeners who work in, various roles around talent development around the world are interested in trying to get more into, to leverage data more, to be more strategic inside of their organizations, and to be seen as more of a critical part of the company. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing. I know that you are working on figuring out the next step in your own journey. But if anybody wants to reach out to you to maybe talk more about data analytics, where's the best place for them to go?
Look, connect with me on LinkedIn. Feel free to drop me a message. I'll make the time. I'm really passionate about this topic and love to help our own community be even more successful than they are today.
Like it. All right. Well, make sure that if you're interested in getting more into data analytics, go connect with Jig. If you're not connected with me on LinkedIn, come on and connect with me as well. Let us know that you heard this interview. Jig, thank you again for coming on. I appreciate it. And I look forward to talking with you more in the future.
Thanks, Andy. Always a pleasure.